All right, how shall we start? I'd like to start by you saying good afternoon to me in Spanish. Buenos dias. You can say good afternoon to me in Swahili.
You will have to tell me how, sir.
You say Habala Gani Wana. And you can say good afternoon to me, Dr. This is the president, y'all. Watch this.
Oh, no.
This president, you can say good afternoon to me in Japanese.
Oh, I do not know how to do that. Konnichiwa, but
Konnichiwa.
I don't.
You can say good afternoon or good day in Hebrew. You can just say shalom.
Shalom.
And you can say it in Arabic.
Salam.
Shalom?
Salam.
Almost. Shalom alaikum. Right? Okay. Now, Emily, you can say good afternoon to me
In English.
if you were in my hometown in Lynch, Kentucky.
Hey.
Hey, Bill. What's up? So, greetings from around the globe. I was born and raised in Lynch, Kentucky, in Harlan County. I'm 75. I did not really, after I got grown, I would never have chosen to be born and raised in Lynch, Kentucky, a year after World War II ended, if I knew the things then that I knew now, as they say. But the only reason I chose to be born in Lynch is that my mama was in Lynch. And most of us tend to be born where our mama is. And my mama had been born in Lynch in 1924. And her mother and father had come to Lynch in 1920 in pursuit of employment. Granny came to be a domestic in the big boss's house in Benham. And my papa came to be a coal miner. And they came out of Macon, Georgia. 99% of the black people who came into eastern Kentucky to work in the coal mines, however, came from central Alabama. They came from in and around Birmingham and Bessemer and Appalachia and Huntsville and down that way. And let's see, maybe we'll cover some of the things I'm trying to do with my work in terms of my life as we go on. Yeah, if you have any questions about my background, just let me know. This book I've done, where is it? This is the cover of my book. It's called The Harlan Renaissance. Now, it's very easy for some of us to say, wonder why he named it that. Let me give you the reason why. In the history of the United States, in the 1920s, the greatest concentration of black people migrated out of the South, the southern states, Georgia, Florida, all the way across to Texas, but not so much Texas, but Oklahoma and a little bit. And they all ended up going into a part of New York City called Harlem, the Harlem Renaissance. Marcus Garvey, that boiling up of black art and music and literature and just a festive place in the 1920s called the Harlem Renaissance. And you know the word Renaissance means rebirth, revitalization. And so I call my book Harlan because at the time that Harlan, Kentucky was at its height as a coal town, the greatest concentration of black people in Kentucky was in Harlan County. Harlan County, Perry County, Pike County, to a lesser extent Letcher County, had a much higher concentration of black people than Fayette County, which is Lexington, or Louisville, although very few people know that. I remember when I went to college in Lexington in 1966, people would say to me, "You from Harlan County? Ain't no black folks up there." And I would look them dead in the eye and say, Lexington is the whitest place I've ever seen in my life. I grew up in Lynch, and we had the blackest town for mountains around. And we were kind of goading about it. I never saw a lot of white people until I went to college. Because when you were in Lynch, Lynch had 38 different nationalities in 1945. People from Germany, Italy, Spain, Czechoslovakia, Russia, Mexico, Puerto Rico, you just name it. They had all come over from Ellis Island in the early 1900s, the Czechs, the Russians, you know, the people named Jablonski, the people named Vecchini, and even a man named Dahlhair. Y'all remember Mr. Dahlhair? He was from Syria. And he came into Harlan County and built one of the biggest stores, chains, that family. That's what my book is partially about. So, and this is a space I call West Kentucky. West Virginia, Southwest Virginia, Eastern Kentucky. And as you know, they fit right together. And this is where all these people that I'm talking about in this book were concentrated. So you say, I do that, and I do that. I want to dedicate this presentation, get up quick, to the one and only. Emily, yes. Thank you, dear. Emily, I dedicated because she has been on this journey for so long, trying to preserve and interpret the history of African Americans in Perry County, in Floyd County, and and you know, she has this wonderful book. We have T-shirts. I walk around in Houston. Somebody said, hey, that's pretty neat, soul miner. And I said, yeah, well, my dad was a coal miner. That's probably where she got that. So Emily has these 3 books, and she has recently founded the Southeast Kentucky African American Museum and Cultural Center. And I beg you all to please support that effort. Oh, there she is, ma'am. El Presidente. Jennifer, thank you so much for helping us get this to be invited. Natalie Gibson, I don't know, I know, Jennifer, you will know her, but Natalie, I worked with her and the president of the community college system named Mike McCall many years ago when Natalie was doing the diversity piece. And diversity here in these colleges talks about promoting inclusive environments where people are respected and providing students and faculty and staff with an opportunity to better understand each other. And it's so important for you young people, like this little young girl right here. Honey, you ain't gonna grow up in a white world. Okay, you ain't. So work on it. And we have to teach these children. For example, we have, I almost said grandchildren her age, but our grandchildren are a little older than you. And we pay for them to get Spanish tutorials. And the reason we do that is we say, y'all live in Houston, Texas. You cannot live in Houston, Texas and be successful and not speak Spanish. 58% of the people in Harris County, Texas are Mexicans and Guatemalans, El Salvador. And you just better get used to it. I think they used to have a restaurant in Hazard called El Grande, didn't it? Or Azura Grande. Big Blue.
Yeah.
Do you still have that? You do know that one of the fastest growing populations in the mountains of the South are Mexican people. Go to Morristown, Tennessee, and you will see how fast the Mexican population is growing. And so this diversity is more than just a pretty word. All right, next slide. There are a few families. Anybody go to Liberty High School? That's probably people here never heard of Liberty High School. Everybody ever heard of Reverend John Pray? Yes. And Houston Hall. I went to UK with Houston many, many years ago. There's a Combs family. There used to be some black Combs and some white Combs. I don't know if people talk about it anymore. I love the cartoon. Olingers, you know, Red Fox. Lots of interesting racial issues here. I don't mean racial in the sense of racial issues, but racial diversity. Because we've been very diverse in Perry County. In fact, I remember one time I heard there was a relatively rich coal owner who died or something. And he had in his will that nobody could inherit any of his money unless they could prove that it was 100% white. That was a man who died. So they took it to the Perry County courts and everybody lined up. The judge threw it out. The judge said, well, hell, ain't nobody 100% white in Perry County. Right. These are all of us from kin around here. Now, I don't know if any of y'all say, I'm 100%. Well, the point of the fact is, that's the way America is. It's a very diverse country, and people have been, there have been biracial families, and at one time, Perry County had more biracial people in the 1940s than any other county in Kentucky. And we just came up with the word biracial in my lifetime. We used to say half white. We say, she's high yellow. Didn't we? Yeah. Y'all look at me like I'm talking off the top of my head. But it's the truth. Hey, old Steve Pete. Anybody know Steve over is it Concord? It's church. So I wrote this book about, one of the reasons I wrote this book is that when I'm dead and gone, I don't want anybody to ever say, whatever happened to the black people of Eastern Kentucky? Because I said, I could do something about that. She's doing something about that. Another reason why I wrote this book is that there's such a wonderful history that can be shown and demonstrated by black people in Eastern Kentucky. And if you don't tell your own story, nobody else is going to tell it. And another thing I would say to this is that one of the reasons why I wanted to write my book is that my book is filled with stories of some extraordinary people who came from some very poor backgrounds. And what it proves is that if you get a superior education, it's pretty hard to discriminate against you. You get a good education, young lady, okay? You get a good education, you get a superior education, and you'll be surprised what doors will open up for you. That's why I think I wrote this book. I also wrote this book because at one time when I was young, see how young I was right there? I had black hair. That picture was taken in 1990, was that 30 years ago? And I was working at that time for this man named Alex Haley. Mr. Haley had written this book called The Autobiography of Malcolm X. It's the most important book he ever wrote, really. But the book that everybody knew the most of was called Roots. And I worked with Mr. Haley for a while. And I had written a book called Blacks in Appalachia. I had co-authored that book. And Alex looked at it one day and said, don't you ever write no more crap like this, Bill. Because it was just a lot of data and this and that. He said, write something your mama will read. And so that's what he did with Roots, and that's what I tried to do with this book. So here's a little bit of facts about, I went to a place called the Lynch Colored Public School. It was etched in the concrete like they were reminding us every day, y'all colored. I said, wonder why they had to put that on there. And you know, now that they put this stuff on here for 100 years, we're in a place in America right now where you have people who say, don't teach the history of what we did. There are people who are saying, in the state of Texas, they're passing laws every day that say you cannot teach critical race theory. You can't even talk about race in the schools because it makes our white children nervous. Have y'all seen this? Okay. Okay. It makes you nervous? What are you talking about? Let's get to that. In 1895, there was a colored school in Perry County, and there was a colored, do I pronounce this right? Vico or Vico?
Vico.
Vico? Y'all still got that wonderful mayor over there. What's his name, that guy?
Johnny.
He's not the mayor anymore, though, is he?
No.
Oh, I love him. The Hazard Colored School got $80 back in that year. And here are the schools you had here. The Hazard Colored School, the Blue Diamond School, the Town Mountain School, the Liberty School, the Kodak School, and the Higgins Colored School. All right here in this little county. That was the Rosenwald School that you went to in Harlan. So the reason we did this is that all of these footprints, I don't know who said it, but I think his name was Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Yeah. The Psalms of Life. It said, the lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives more sublime, for in departing they leave behind them footprints in the sands of time. Don't let your footprints get washed away. That's what we're trying to do, is say, hey, these people were here. This is what they did. This is what they contributed. They're from a great tribe. Because someday people will say, who were they? Where did they come from? What did they do? What did they contribute? What happened to them? And that's what I try to do in these 385 pages right here. It took me 20 years, but I got most of it done. Berea College's Carter G. Woodson, that is the person most responsible for what we now call Black History Month. He was a coal miner in West Virginia. He went to Berea College in 1898 and graduated in 1903. Carter G. Woodson. He founded something called the Association for the Study of African-American Life and Culture. Am I hitting it in the right place? Ah, there it is. Ed Cabell is he and I published this book here in 1985 called Blacks in Appalachia. That man dedicated his life to that study. Let's get started. Okay, who is this guy? What does he know about growing up black in Appalachia? That's me, right here. That picture was taken when I was 4. That picture is 71 years old. They used to describe me and my brothers and sisters as stair-step children. Any of y'all from a stair-step family? See, it was 10 of us, because Mama had 3 more after this. And I used to ask my, Lord, back. I used to ask my dad, Dad, my oldest sister is 7.8 years older than I am. 7 years, 8 months older. This sister right here is exactly 12 months older than me. And I was like, Dad, how did Mama have 5 children in 7.8 years? You know what he said? He said, well, buddy, every day the train come up to Harlan at 5 o'clock in the morning. He said, it's too damn early to get up and too late to go back to sleep. That's my dad right there. This check was drawn from United States Steel on December 31st, 1946. I was 6 months old, and Daddy had drawn $98.66 after 74 hours of working, and he brought home $41.70. I spent that much yesterday in an airport in Dallas for lunch. And my daddy took care of us. It's remarkable. And plus, after she had these other children, then one of Mama's best friends died of something called cancer, which we hadn't heard of back much in 1961. And Mama raised her 3 children. And I used to ask Dad, why does Mama cuss so much? Because Mama said, sit you down. Did anybody have a mama that talked a little trash? My mama didn't. You know what I'm talking about, right there? Okay. Well, my father explained the way my mama would talk trash. I said, son, she had 2 or 3 of y'all in diapers at one time. You'd be crazy too. And he said, you just do what she tells you. Don't worry about how she tells you. Because that's her way of keeping order. And someday you'll thank her for that. Yes, yes. Okay. Very quickly, let's go through this so we're not confused about who is Appalachia and where is Appalachia. This space right here is called Appalachia, about black people in this space. If you had to ask yourself, if that's Appalachia, the white spaces in those 14 states, some 405 counties, where would you guess the most black people live in those spaces? They live in Pittsburgh and Birmingham. Okay? A lot of people don't think of Pittsburgh and Birmingham as being Appalachia, but there it is. One of my sister-in-laws went to college in Appalachia. She went to college in Poughkeepsie, New York. That's where Vassar College is, one of the finest colleges in the world. And after Cecily studied at Vassar, then she went to Vanderbilt and got a medical degree. So Charleston, Prestonsburg, Hagerstown, there's a little old town about 60 miles from here over the mountain over 23 called what? Appalachia, where my daddy was born right next door in Colburn and Wise. And Tri-Cities, Tennessee, Elvis Presley was born in Tupelo, Mississippi, Appalachia. Birmingham, Alabama. So that's what we're talking about according to the Appalachian Regional Commission. There it is again. Here's Kentucky's Appalachian counties. Look at that right there. Edmonson County, which is Warren County. I think Warren County is Hopkinsville last time I looked, didn't it? So if you look, they're saying the same place they call Appalachia in Edmonson County is the same as Perry County. And there's a really big difference between Edmonson County and, you know, when you get up around the river, heck, there's a little bit more in here. Not long ago, nobody wanted to be called an Appalachian, but just look right now, there are people who call themselves Expats. They're expatriates. They live outside the region, but they write about the region. I noticed not long ago that, guess where that county is right there? That's Youngstown, Ohio. That is now considered an Appalachian county. So just look at all those Ohio counties. It used to be just the ones along the river down here. But now the Appalachian, because it's politics, it's money. Give us some of that money. And I read an article rather recently called the Appalachianification of Mississippi. There are many parts, most of the black people live in Mississippi, that's an Appalachian space too, in Starkville, Mississippi, Mississippi State. We're talking about that. That's an Appalachian county. I don't think you can convince many of those people that they're Appalachians, though. They'll say they're Southerners. But that's just part of the question of money and getting eligible for federal grants. Simple. Appalachia is a political-driven brand. It's convenient to be Appalachian sometimes. That's what we're trying to say. Between cornbread and tortillas, it just runs into this booming Hispanic population and its growing food scene in the Appalachian space. There's a poet who renamed the whole region. He renamed all the black people Afro-Latians. Another highly thought of person, Bell Hooks, who grew up in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, but Bell said, I would only know these hills as Appalachia. Once again, Appalachia. Now, I asked that woman right there once, that's my mother. I asked Mama, I said, Mama, do you identify as an Appalachian? Mama said, now, Bill, you know darn well I'm a Baptist. Because I'll bet you, if you go to the average person walking down the street in Hazard, they never refer to themselves as Appalachians. They just might say, oh, we're simple mountain people. They very rarely use that term that way. This term is used primarily by scholars and poets and writers. Yeah, you just go over here to Red Fox, somebody say, what the heck are you talking about, buddy? Now, let's get to a little bit about stereotypes. I don't know how many of you did not read this book, but you may want to read Hillbilly Elegy. And some people are shaking their heads, no, I don't want to read that. But you have to remember, every 20 years or so, a book comes out that redoes the old Appalachian stereotypes. You remember Harry Calder wrote a book in the 1960s called Night Comes to the Cumberlands. Harry was from Whitesburg. I think Mr. Vance's family was Jackson County or Breathitt County, was it, one or the other. And then this fella here named Ron Howard, Opie of Andy Griffin fame, they put a movie out recently called Hillbilly Elegy and made a lot of money out of it. Growing Up Black in Appalachia. Those are books. Kinfolks, Gurney. Don't y'all embrace Gurney Norman? Gurney is from right here in Hazard. Another guy, James Steele, over here at, what's wrong with me? Help me quick. Yeah, in Knott County. Everybody knows this guy right here? Go by Apple Shop. You got your Apple Shop camera on back there, young lady? All right, there's Alex. Alex is a Berea student. Alex is probably one of the first African Americans involved in a national organization in the mountains. He's the head of Apple Shop. Brilliant young lawyer, biracial from Jackson County. Unbelievably smart. That goes back to some people that I studied under when I was younger. I think that was 1988. Lord, see, I had black hair back then. Shoot, man, I was young one time. Recently, my wife and I took our grandchildren to Alex Haley Park in Knoxville. Did I meet somebody from Knoxville earlier today? Yeah, there you are. And so we have been trying to bring our grandchildren back to where we grew up, so they would know, you know, they never spent a night on a cold camp. Because my parents were dead when she was born, and this was 21. Dad has been dead 38 years. And so we brought them back to Lynch and made them, we could have stayed in a hotel, but we stayed in our old home place. And they were going, you mean all 80 of y'all grew up in this little bitty house? Because they grew up in, you know, when my daddy took me to just show what can happen in one generation. When my daddy took me to Lexington in 1966 to go to UK, he took me to what is called a panel truck. Anybody know what a panel truck is? That's where you drove in. It took you 7 miles to get from Lynch to Lexington in 1966. When my son got ready to go to Morehouse College in Atlanta, I let him take my Porsche. Things that change in one generation. Yeah, go ahead and take it. I'll come back and get it next week, though. So, you know, when you talk about that kind of intergenerational mobility, that was all about when my daughter was able to go to Spelman and my son was able to go to Morehouse, And then we had a family reunion recently, a bunch of grandchildren sitting around, and one of them had gone to Columbia, one of them had gone to Stanford, one of them had gone to Harvard, one of them had gone to Duke, one of them had gone to Penn, one of them more. And I was saying, boy, I wish Daddy could see these great-grandchildren of his. Because those same values, that's what we try to write about. And it was just our family. There was lots of families like that, from Harlan and Jenkins and Hazard, those people that went to Cleveland, Chicago, Ypsilanti or Appalachia or whatever they called it. They went up 23, and I bet any of you sitting in here, white or black, know families that left the mountains and were able to go and readjust and readapt and cope and make it past when grandpa, because my daddy went to the 3rd grade. My mother went to the 10th grade. He married her when she was 15 in 1938. And there's probably some of y'all students say, oh, that sounds like my grandparents too, because that was very common. Lynch High School band. You know, I was lecturing to some young black people up there, and I said, the only thing y'all know about music is how to turn on Spotify. That's all, because people used to be in bands. They had juke joint bands, man, to get them play guitars and just could make music. Now kids turn things on. We used to learn music in our schools. We don't do it anymore. This man is the one who talked me into my work on blacks in Appalachia. His name is John Bell Stevenson. John died when he was president of Berea College. And John and I were talking one day in 1966, and he said, you know what, when you go to graduate school, he had made arrangements to help me. He said, I'm going to introduce you to people at Notre Dame, and you go to Notre Dame and get a PhD. I said, Notre Dame? Oh, that sounds pretty cool. And I went. And John said, dedicate your study. And I said, man, I'm not studying nothing about no black people in the Appalachia. Lord have mercy. I've been watching the Beverly Hillbillies. Did any of y'all see a movie called Deliverance? Oh, Lord. Those are wicked stereotypes. They used to have one called the Dukes of Perry County. Dukes of But didn't they make them look pretty dysfunctional? Oh, Lord. In fact, they even made fun of the way my daddy talked. My daddy was from Coburn, Virginia. How else do you expect him to talk except like that back there? Daddy would say it's nice and it's white and it's ice and rice and he's ignorant as hell. That's what Daddy used to say. Yeah. Some of y'all probably got a pawpaw that rice rhymes with ice, and they say rice and fat and night. Here's where they used to make fun of how white folks in the mountain talk, baby. You ever heard the joke about how there was this white man, his truck had broke down out here on Highway 15, and he went up on the side of the hill and picked a whole bunch of roses and lilies and things and put them all around his car. Police walked up to him and said, Woodrow, what are you doing? He said, well, buddy, I looked in the manual here and said if it break down, put out some flares. My father used to say flares. Mom would say, Earl, it's flowers. Dad said flares. I bet you know somebody that says flares. That's the way they made fun of the dialect of Southern white talking. It's called Appalachian vernacular. Just as many black people have something called AfricanAmerican vernacular. We call it Ebonics. Y'all bonics. But they said white folks are banjo playing, family feuding, Scotch Irish hillbillies who toted guns. They were incestuous, moonshining, ornery, semi-literate, toothless people. That's what they put in those movies about you. And so he tried to talk me into studying black people who were in these same situations, in these same spaces. And I said, nah, man, I'll check you out later. You see what they did? This is what they made Jethro and Ellie Mae. And then we had me called Sambo and Willie Mae. Right? You might be a redneck if. You remember that guy named Jeff Foxworthy? He got rich making jokes about Southern white people. The Beverly Hillbillies. In fact, you might be the only people left in America that you can make dirty jokes about and nobody will say you're prejudiced. Because it's all right to make fun of Southern white people. Except Appalachia has stopped them from doing that. Because Appalachia put out a whole new conversation on that identity. So here's my point. If you're from Eastern Kentucky, you'll find places called Aegis, R.J., Benham, Black Joe. There was a town they named after this black man in Harlan County called Black Joe. There was another town called Black Mountain, Black Star, Bongelico, all these. In fact, between Perry County and Harlan County, there were 98 different coal camps that opened up during that coal. 98 little places. And that's when all those people went here in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, just hundreds of, just people everywhere. And this is where they came to. That's what I've been trying to talk about in my book, the people where that black star is. This lady right here, I commend you to study Effie Wallace Smith. Effie was a poet born in Clow Creek in Pike County, and she, 1879. And she went to Kentucky State. She was publishing in the Atlantic Monthly and in Harper's Magazine in the 1890s. Effie Wallace Smith, an accomplished poet who went to Kentucky State from Pike County. Here's a good book called African-American Minors and Migrants. It's about black people on this side. So all these people who came up from Alabama, they came up from in around Birmingham. That's where they came. There's our feet coming into Kentucky in the 1880s up to 1940. And this is where we ended up. We ended up in Benham, in Black Mountain, in Corbin, East Bernstead, Everett, Harlan, Hazard, Jenkins, Lynch, McRoberts, Fleming, Neon, Middlesboro, Pikeville, Pineville, Wheelwright. And you go over the mountain into, similarly you can see them in this part of East Tennessee, Southwest Virginia. My daddy born in Coburn, Dant, as they say, Norton and Bennington Gap, Stoneacre and Wise, and the real big concentration of black people is in West Virginia. Bluefield, Beckley, Welch, those places. That's Lynch, Kentucky. Beautiful. The tipple was there. You drive by there right now, it doesn't look not so nice. But at one time in the 1930s, Lynch could lay claim to being the greatest coal camp in the whole world. It had the largest tipple in the world, was that place right there where my father worked for 47 years. And that was in October. I saw it this morning. Those trees are the same way. Some black men in Harlan up at Black Mountain. This man here owned a funeral home in Harlan. What was his name? Simmons? Fuson. Yeah. This is going into McRoberts. These coal camps where these black people lived. And they came here, you can just see how the mechanization is what ran them out, when they mechanized in the mines. Families everywhere. This is a Hazard family 80 years ago. I got some photographs from Alice Lloyd College. That was fantastic stuff about your family too over there, of course. People in Lynch in the 1950s. So that's the way it used to look. These are those preachers. I could never get the name of these black preachers in Hazard. This picture was taken in 1925. Black people building the railroads. Black people built the railroads from Corbin all the way to Lynch. And if you remember, in 1919, they ran all the black people out of Corbin one night. 240 of them, put them on a train and ran them out of town in one night. One night. Their houses, everything. Some specious argument. This is where I would like to list what I would call the values that drove us. Hardworking, families first, religion, faithfulness, soul miners, right? Schooling, we believed in schooling. We were neighborly, and we had to have a sense of humor, otherwise you could never make it. If you took yourself too seriously in the mountains, you'd be in trouble, because somebody's going to always let you know where you stand. So as you know, I could cover this up. These aren't black Appalachian values. Oh, Lord, what did I do to it? Oh, Jesus.
I think if you just touch it.
What do I do?
Just touch your slide again, I think. No, the slide you want to. Yeah, that's.
Oh, that one.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. There you go.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. So this is how everybody lived around here. You know, so I got this duality of this black face and this white face because we basically had the same way of living. We were all relatively poor. And, you know, as I used to say, everybody's black in a coal mine. Now, sometimes when you come out, it ain't so much so once people come out of the mine, I guess. This is a street up the street from where I grew up in Lynch. Yeah, number 5 they called it. We loved these mountains long before it was a hip thing to do. the Lynch Portal 31. These men here, I knew each and every one of them when I was a child. They had 54 children between them, which wasn't uncommon. People, you know, remember we saw our mama had 9.
Makes me say, oh Lord.
Last 4 black coal miners in East Kentucky. I took that picture myself. Patsy and Ricky and Jerry and Drina. And in fact, the picture graces the front of the cover of the Encyclopedia of African Americans in Kentucky. My mama played at this little church called the Rising Star Baptist Church. My mama played in there for 40 years. We had benevolent organizations. People were pretty good to each other. They took care of each other. There was no such thing as nobody had anything to eat, because somebody would always take care of you. And in these places, what was life like for them in these schools? We had excellent segregated churches and uncomplicated apolitical preachers, whatever that means. Then that thing came along. Anybody here a coal miner? That's a continuous miner. It just eats through the mountain like that. And I remember after a lawsuit filed by the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights, my father got a job to run one of these machines. And he said, Billy, I got the best job at the coal mine now, except one thing. It put 300 boys out of work. Because right after that happened, the population just went shoot, because they didn't need 300 people to do what Daddy did in an 8-hour shift. And now, as you know, all you got to have is some dynamite and a big truck. And 10 guys can get the coal off the top of the mountain. This is how the black population decreased in Harlan County between 1940 and 2018, so that, as I note here, if the general population of whites and black population in Harlan County had gone down the way the black population went down, there would be no people in Harlan County at all. None. Same in Perry County. The black population has virtually disappeared. That's my father again. That's a mountaintop removal scene. You can see it going between here and Prestonsburg if you want to any day of the week. I'm about done, I think. And what did we learn when we followed the footprints? If you study what happened to us, you can make a pretty good prediction about the future, because what happens when a company leaves? When just one company dominates a whole town. And see, we've gotten to that place in America. America's economy is dominated by about 4 or 5 companies. They're called Amazon. The largest employer in Eastern Kentucky is called Walmart. All right? So when you have 3 or 4 companies running it, it's the same way it was in these coal towns. When they pull up, they pull up. When they pull out, they pull out. What happens to you? Everybody gets on dope? Hello? Because that's one of the scourges of Appalachia right now is Oxycontin and methamphetamine addiction, because people are trying to adjust to, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't go to Detroit. I can't go to Cincinnati. There's nothing up there no more. What are we going to do? What do you do when there's no work? What happens in communities? What happens to, who cares about the people and their children? And how can we get kids to know no matter what they take from you, they can't take your education, which is the importance of places like this college where kids can get something in their heads. Once again, they've left. They've gone to Knoxville. They've gone to Chattanooga. They've gone to Cincinnati. They've gone to Lexington. They've gone to Louisville. They've gone to Atlanta. They've gone to Charlotte. The mountains are emptying out. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more. Ray Charles, remember that? Some of y'all ain't old enough to remember that song. Great book called AfricanAmerican Migrants. What happened to us? Why did we have to leave? You can see how it went down. Perry County's total population now is just under 30,000. You could get all the black people in Perry County in this room. That's not an exaggeration. So what's the nature of life like for black people in these little former coal towns? What's it like now? Tell me. It's a fascinating thing to interview people. What are you young kids doing? What's happening to them? We need to get them together and start talking and developing. What's the role? Who are their role models? Are there any African-American lawyers and doctors and dentists in the healthcare? Healthcare is probably the biggest thing around here. And what is the nature of race relations in the mountains now? What's it like? Do people talk? I don't know. What does the fact that 90% of the presidential vote in Eastern Kentucky and Southwest Virginia, in West Kentucky, it went to Donald Trump in 2016. What does that mean? Well, it may mean the same thing because that same figure could be applied to San Francisco. It was basically highly educated college graduate white women. They also voted for Trump, but the world will give you the impression that conservative politics only takes place in Appalachia. That's a bad rap too. So what about the scourge of methamphetamine and heroin and opioids in the mountains today? I mean, I proudly tell people how my grandmother was a bootlegger. Yes, she sold moonshine. My father could have starred in Robert Mitchum's Tobacco Road, because Daddy used to drive to Jellicoe, Tennessee to get the whiskey to bring back to Harlan County. But you know, it's a whole different deal with crack and methamphetamines and opioids. That's a different deal in terms of where that takes people. You know, I heard my grandmama say, Lord, if they'd had that marijuana when I was selling moonshine, we'd have been rich. I said, Granny, you shouldn't say that. It's true. So it took me, I've been up here now, what time did I start? 5:30? Right? Yeah. Okay, it took me 45 minutes to go over what I teach a course called Blacks in Appalachia. It usually takes me 16 weeks. I hope in these 45 minutes you're saying, oh, I understand a little bit now. Better. Thank you. I'm done, I think. Yes. Thank you very much. I'm done. Now, if anybody has any questions or answers, I'll gladly entertain either one of them.